Rising Sun, a new game by Cool Mini or Not. It is a game that is so new that it is actually not out yet, but thanks to my powers of time traveling, I was able to get to next year, grab a copy and bring it back here. Well, no, that's not exactly what happened. What happened is that a friend of mine won a copy at the lottery at GenCon 2017. They had a limited number there and he was one of the lucky winners. Also lucky me, because this way I got to play the game, and also he was kind enough to let me borrow his copy so that I could film this video review. Thank you, Sam, I owe you one. So Rising Sun, a game by Eric Lang, a game that definitely is in the Ameritrash family, in the best sense of the words, with beautiful components, a lot of cardboard, lots of plastic. Differently from many Ameritrash games, though, little or no luck, and that is quite interesting. So it has some Euro elements that sneak into the design through what at first sight looks like a very Ameritrashy game. It still has the Ameritrash elements of having many rules and different elements, being thematically heavy with different elements of the theme being captured by subsystems of rules. It's complex without being overcomplicated. There are a lot of rules. It'll take me a while to cover the main concepts of the game, but once you start playing it, the game flows fairly well. The theme is fantasy, medieval Japan. It starts as, like, it seems almost reasonable, almost historical, but then monsters, demons, onis start walking the land and attacking your armies, and then you realize that there's something else going on. Beautiful miniatures for a game pretty much of political, economic, and military conquest. Use procedures and spend resources to take control or to gain an advantage in certain areas during the main turn. At the end of the main turn, there will be a fight, a battle, and that will determine who controls each area. That will get you to score points, and that will decide who the winner of the game is in the end. Let's take a closer look at Rising Sun. Big, heavy box full of delightful components. Let's start our exploration of the game by having a quick general look at the board. I personally really like it. I like the look of it. Several people seem to disagree with me. They don't find it aesthetically pleasing. But actually, the point is that the map is very simple. It has 8 playable areas with some C connections here and there. It is so basic, and of course you have some tracks around, but the main area is so basic, so simple, that I'm glad that the background is visually very thick. It has a lot going on. It fills the map. This way the map doesn't look too abstract, too empty. Otherwise, well, that would be my impression. So I don't mind that there is a very thick visual texture with a lot of decorations, they call them that way, because they make the map colorful, in my opinion. They do not impede gameplay because the playable area is so simple. So this is the main area, and these are the regions where the players will be moving, their pieces will be engaging in battle, and they will try to take control of different regions at different times. The game lasts 3 seasons or years or ages, and each age, let's call it that way, during each age, only some region will be interesting, will give points to the player that controls them. For example, here at the end of the season or age, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Edo, Shikoku, Kansai, and Nagato will score. The other regions not. So these are the regions that right now we want to control. At the end of this age, we put these tiles away, we take another stack of tiles, shuffle them, and we place random tiles there. As you can see, some tiles will not be used. So that tells us where the interesting stuff is, because that is where we're going to score points. There is a section there where you will place tiles representing the gods and goddesses that the players are trying to please in order to gain certain effects. There are certain game pieces that you can place on the board as warriors, or you can send them to the shrines of the deities to gain the effects. So for example, Amaterasu will increase your honor. This guy here will allow you to move pieces on the map. This one gives you Ronin, that are particularly powerful warriors in combat, and with the favor of that, deity, you get extra coins. As you can see, there are extra deities that will not be used in every game, so you have variety there. Honor track. Several game effects are based on your position on the honor track. The higher you are, the better, or to say, the more honorable. There are certain game effects that activate if you are with the lowest honor. Yeah, the game also has that option there. But being high in honor has a huge advantage, which is the tiebreaker. And there are a lot of times where having a majority of, say, an advantage of 2 pieces over the opponent is hard, or just having a majority of 1. And so having a tie and having the tiebreaker can be huge. This is the turn track, a little bit unusual. We'll see how that works. And then, well, we should have a closer look at the miniatures. So we have several parties. They represent the warriors that the players can use. We have generic warriors. They may have different sculpts, but as long as the base is just the same color as the miniatures, that doesn't matter. The white bases are the Shinto miniatures, that is the ones that can be used as warriors, deploying them on the board normally, or they can be sent to the shrines to worship the deities. Again, another look at some of the other sculpts. So you can see each party has different set of sculpts, not just different colors. Each player has a piece with a black base, and that is the daimyo, that simply counts as a normal combat piece, but there are certain game effects that will apply to the daimyo only. The daimyo is impervious to certain negative game effects, and so on and so forth. So you get a sense of what each player may have. Each player will have one of these factions / parties. Also, there are these big monsters that can be recruited during the game, and you have special bases, color bases, and for example, if I recruit this guy, I place a base of my color under that guy, and I put it on the map, and now it's clear who controls that monster. Really impressive miniatures. Unsurprising from Cool Mini or not, because we have been spoiled by them with excellent miniatures, but well, it's always nice to find a confirmation that they still know how to do what they're known for, and they still can do it well. Nice, impressive miniatures. And when you have these large monsters on the board, that creates a quite impressive visual situation. Now, at the beginning of the game, you will have some miniatures on the board. You will have a starting placement in the honor track. And then, after you set up, you're ready to start. Remember, what you're trying to do mainly is to take control of areas to score points. And also, there are other ways of scoring points, for example, by fulfilling the conditions of certain cards that you can purchase. The turn track. The turn track reminds us that at the beginning of each age, there is going to be a phase of negotiation. That's sort of like Tau symbol indicates the fact that players may make alliances. In fact, you have tiles of this shape here, and if, say, purple and yellow player are allied, you put those two tiles together. Pretty neat, right? So you can form alliances at the beginning of each age. There is a negotiation phase. You can break alliances, make new alliances. Being an ally with somebody gives you huge advantages, because you may get resources when they go, you may get advantages out of turn. The disadvantage, of course, is that you're giving another player the same advantages. I'm getting a certain bonus from you, but then when I perform certain actions, I'm giving you that bonus. So there is that double-edged element there. Then we're going to have a couple of regular turns, and we'll see how they work in a minute. Then we're going to have the shrine. That is, every time we encounter that symbol, we're going to check how many points of influence, how many figures we have on those shrines, and the player that has the majority gets to perform the effect. For example, if I have the majority on Amaterasu, my honor will go up to the top of the track. If I have the majority in Fujin, I can move 2 of my units anywhere on the board. And if there's a tie, the player with the highest honor. And since I have Amaterasu, because I am purple, I just got there on top of the track. And now I also get Fujin, because I have the tiebreaker, which is the honor. And so you look at each shrine. And this is what you do during these special turns here. Then 2 more regular turns, so we check the shrines and get the bonuses again. 2 more turns, shrines. And then the war phase, in which we resolve a battle in each area on the board where there are miniatures of multiple players. Like this would be the case, we would have a war there in that phase. So the main turn is where you're accumulating resources, getting people on the board, moving units around, pretty much setting up the situation, and then boom, 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 you go across the board. You move around the board and you resolve battle in each area where battle needs to be resolved. Now, as for the main turns, they are resolved using these tiles here. These tiles represent actions that can be taken. You shuffle these tiles, and then starting with the first player will draw a number of these tiles, look at them, choose one which becomes the action for the turn, put the other ones down, and then after we resolve that one, the stack goes to the next player. Oh, thank you for giving me the stack. The next player looks again at the top tiles, chooses one, puts them down, and so on and so forth. I'm looking at these tiles. So not all tiles will be available, of course, each turn, only the ones that are on top, but you still have a good selection of action to take. And also, not all parties, not all factions are born equal. There are factions with special abilities that allow you to play these tiles in different ways, manipulate the stack. Different parties have different abilities that can be pretty neat. Now, but how am I going to remember all of those effects? So many things. Fear not, there is a truly excellent player rate that tells you what happens when certain actions are taken. If the active player has chosen recruit, then all players will summon one figure at each of their strongholds. These are the strongholds. And so you simply take a figure from your personal supply and you put it there. If you're summoning a Shinto, that is, again, the figures that can go to those shrines, then you may allocate them to the shrine. You can deploy them to the shrine instead of your stronghold. You and your ally also summon an additional figure. Again, it's good to be an ally, and it's good to have an ally, because I'm gonna get a figure when you play recruit, but then if I play recruit, you're getting that bonus. Marshal. If the active player has chosen to marshal, then all players will move their figures across one border or shipping route. So you're simply moving on the board, again, from route to route, from one end to the other, or adjacent. The map has this interesting element. The Nagato is sort of like in the middle of the map, but it doesn't have any shipping connection, and it only has one land connection. Well, so while it is physically here, it is possibly the most isolated place on the board. Makes it easy to defend, makes it hard if you start there to expand in other places. There are pluses and minuses connected to Nagato. But marshal pretty much means moving your units on the board. Also, however, if alliances are in place, you may build a stronghold by spending 3 coins. Coins are super mega important, as you will see when it comes to battle. Fighting is expensive in this game. Training. You go first, that is the player that is using training as their active actions, but all actions may buy one available season card. These are cards that will give you benefits, may allow you to get monsters, so those big monsters on the board, to get the points at the end of the game, charge money to the other players to do certain actions. All certain of possible advantages may come from here. Also, you and the ally will get a discount to 1 less coin. Harvest. When you perform the harvest action, every player collects a coin, and also you and the ally collect rewards from each province where you have a superior force. Each province is connected to a reward, and if you have the majority there when the harvest is played, you get the reward. For example, here I get a victory point, that is the rising sun symbol, a coin, and a Ronin token that again can be used during combat. This will give me 3 victory points, controlling the province 2 coins and 2 victory points, 4 victory points, and so on and so forth. This can be very powerful, so if you are allied with somebody, make sure that when you choose the harvest, you're not getting them a ton of resources during your turn, so that they still have their turn. So that can be very powerful and double-edged sword if also your pal, your ally, your BFF is gaining too much from it. Betray, you only. This is, I think, is the only action that only affects the player that plays it. Well, that only depends on that. That will affect other players too. But there's only one player that makes decisions here. You replace any 2 figures from different players on the map with one of your own. That can really change the balance of forces as figures of one color turn into figures of another color. However, that is a particularly dishonorable thing to do. And so, if you have an alliance, you break it and you lose honor. So these are the main actions that you take. So as you can see, you score points, you gain resources, you do long-term planning by getting cards and maybe will give advantages in the following turns. Exploit advantages from the deities, use actions to influence the shrine, to move people on the board, to get majority or at least a good position before the war starts. And at the end of the turn, the war will start. The war can be a little tricky at the beginning, but it makes sense after a little bit. This is the play area that we used for the mandates that are these actions here. Now we flip it to the other side and we use this board for combat, to resolve combat. Each battle will be resolved checking these actions and resolving them from left to right. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do during and around the battle, not just fighting. Each player has a screen that also gives you a reminder of the special actions that player can perform, and then each player will have a supply of money, and the more money you have, the better things are. So you resolve combat in all areas that have units of both sides in it. Each player takes this board, places it behind their secret screen, and then each player allocates coins to the various slots and boxes that you see here. You don't have to allocate any if you don't want. There's no limitation. You can allocate a lot, not so much. Choose your actions, distribute your wealth. You do not have, again, to use all of your resources. Completely up to you. But then, once we are done allocating resources, we lift up our screens and we start looking at the boxes from left to right, and the player that has spent the most, that has the majority, will actually get to perform the action. Not everybody will get to do seppuku, only the player that spent the most to do seppuku. In case there's a tie, you guessed it, honor is the tiebreaker. Huge element here. And of course, there are other things that you want to spend money for, so it's always a fine path that you're walking there, buying stuff that you need and saving money for the battle phase. This is the general idea. Suppose another player has the majority in taking hostage, so I will not resolve that action. Then I have the majority here, so I will resolve that action. Another player spent more than me in imperial points, and so I do not get to do that action. So after all is said and done, when you compare the boards, only some actions will be taken. It may be that no one invests in a certain action, so that doesn't happen in that battle. And then you resolve the actions, and each player that has the majority in that action resolves it. Seppuku, you may kill all of your figures and gain victory points and honor for each. This can be very powerful if you think I'm going to lose the battle anyways. At least I'm going to score victory points. I remove all of my figures, which can be expensive, but I gain honor. There may be advantages in this. There may be battles where you gain a lot just by showing up and killing yourself, as counterintuitive as it may sound. Hostage, you may take one hostage. That is, you take a figure from the opponent. You also take a victory point from the opponent. Actually, I picked this up. That's not correct. This is the daimyo, who is immune to being taken hostage. But you take a figure from the opponent. And you also take a victory point. Higher in the Ronin, you may add your Ronin tokens to your force. So during the turn, you will probably have used game effects to collect Ronin tokens that will add to your fighting capability, but only one player will get to add their tokens. You may have a ton of Ronin tokens. You spent a lot putting together a huge army, and now you don't have enough money to get the majority here and to actually bring them to the battle. But if you are the player with the majority and you get to resolve this action, you add your Ronin to your force. At this point, you had the outcome of battle. After the forces may have been altered by hostages, by people killing themselves, by Ronin joining the fight, then you count how many combat points you have. Each figure by itself, usually by default, is worth a single combat point. Ronins are worth a single combat point. Right now, yellow wins this battle with 6 against 7. And then you simply eliminate the forces of the opponent. After that, the aftermath is that the player, if there is such a player that has majority here that activates the Imperial Poets action, will gain victory points for every figure that was killed. Doesn't matter how the figure died or when. If you paid the poets and the poets are there to document a gruesome battle, that's gonna make a great piece of fiction. Everybody's gonna wanna see that. You see, it seems like medieval Japan and modern Hollywood blockbusters have pretty much the same taste. Everybody wants to see the carnage or listen to a song about the carnage. And so you're gonna score points because your poets have produced the most compelling narrative. And this is how combat works. It seems convoluted, but in truth, not all actions will be used each battle. And try to think what the opponent is trying to get, how they're spending their resources, and where and to do what. It's a big part of the strategy of the battle, if not like all that the battle is about. You think about it, it is deterministic. There is no die roll. If you could have perfect knowledge of what the opponent is going to do, you could have perfect knowledge of what's going to happen. But you don't. So it's all about bluffing and trying to read the opponent. So you resolve all battles, you start a new age, that is, you collect these tokens, you have new areas to determine what people will fight for. Of course, after the battles, the winner of a battle in a certain area will take the token that corresponds to that region, which is also worth victory points at the end of the game. Use extra points for forming sets of regions, that is, not by collecting several copies of the same region, but by moving around and collecting different sets of different regions. Other victory points you score from special game effects, for example, by buying those cards that I mentioned earlier. And at the end of the game, of the third year or age, the player with the most victory points is the winner of the game. I like this game a lot. I'm so happy that my friend happened to win a copy. If you pre-ordered the game, well, maybe it'll cause you more pain because now you will want to have it even more. But that is a good thing. That is a good problem to have as you're waiting for your game. Know that this is a very good game. I had a blast playing it. I enjoyed it very much. It retired a couple of other games that I had played before that I saw some similarities with, and this one just does things so much better than the other games. Other games, so the dudes on the board family, this one is an excellent one. I'm thinking of Cry Havoc, for example, where you also have different powers, different parties that are trying to take control of various areas on a board that doesn't have many areas. It has more than here, but not too many. And this one just does everything better than Cry Havoc does. I'm thinking about Cry Havoc, the sci-fi game that came out last year, I believe, not like older games with a similar title. There are similarities with other games, and while this one doesn't retire and doesn't send them to retirement, it's nice to see those similarities. In particular, one of my favorite games ever is Shogun. I'm thinking about the Dirk Hans game, not the old American trashy game, which I haven't played. Some people played Rising Sun with me, and they told me there are similarities with the old Shogun too. But for the Euro Shogun, I like the fact that, like in that game here, there is a selection of actions, you're committing to certain actions, there is a certain range of things that you can do, build, recruit, move people, etc., etc. In Dirk Hans Shogun, you have to do more planning because you have to plan ahead all the actions that you're taking. Here's more reactive. Well, there is a certain range of actions that you can take now, and I decide which one I'm going to take now and which ones I'm going to leave for the other players with some unique faction powers allowing you to manipulate that a little bit. So there are these Eurogamey almost elements that are at the core of this majestic looking game with all of these beautiful and very trashy components with a lot of theme. So it's an interesting, I would say, it's a thematic Euro or a Euro leaning Ameritrash game, whichever way you want to see it. It's an unusual and interesting blend of these different philosophies of play that somehow come together really well. The Euro element, selecting actions, spending resources, heck, even combat has to do with investing wisely. What's more Euro than that? So, but you have these Euro elements that do not feel dry at all. If anything, they help streamlining the experience and they make the game flow well. Of course, they make good planning and good reaction and good reading of the opponent worth it. So you feel that the game is meritocratic, it's not gonna be derailed by swings of fortune. It really is about budgeting resources, etc., etc. And yet in a game that feels very much about fighting, about conquest, etc., etc., etc. I also like the fact that it really doesn't feel like a generic game of combat and we're gonna add some samurais and onis because they look cool on the map. There are thematic elements here which are impressive. Seppuku, you don't see that represented very often in board games. I think it's a sorely underrepresented element in games. I'd like to see that more often. Taking hostages that you have in some games but not in others. The Imperial Poets, you're gonna gain if you were points, if you're smart enough to send a poet to record a battle which is gonna be huge and memorable, even if you did lose the battle. So you may show up the battle and still get a lot of points because you committed seppuku and maybe you took an hostage and your poets collect a lot of points. And that the player won the battle. Just all that happens around and before the battle is interesting enough to give you an advantage there if you're able to do well in that department, even if you lose the battle itself. So these battles are very nuanced and they get even more interesting, of course, when you have more than 2 players, which is entirely possible. Then I'm trying to think what everybody's trying to do. You're trying to outwit and to outsmart the opponent, to bluff a little bit. I think that he thinks that I think, etc., etc., etc. Well, actually enough that all that takes place in a range of options, which is not too big, so it's not overwhelming, but it's definitely a lot of fun to try to guess what you are trying to do. I know that you're trying to do seppuku. But how much are you going to invest? So how do I go around that? How do I react to the fact that you were going to commit seppuku? Or what if I invest a lot in seppuku, even though I don't want to do it, but I have the majority in that department, I'm going to have the option of doing it. Sometimes you're going to want to win the option of taking certain actions in battle, not because you want to take them, but because you want to deprive an opponent. So there are all sorts of levels of decisions there. And they are tied, of course, to currency, to cash, which is limited, and you need for a lot of things. You may have spent a lot of money recruiting fantastic armies, and then you're not able to bring them to bear because you're still gonna get a disadvantage when the battle starts, and vice versa. If you're numerically the disadvantage is going to be hard, but if you have a lot of money to invest in doing other things, still good things may happen to you. I found the combat system to be a lot of fun. I mean, I look for, during the turn, I look forward to the time where we are going to fight. I dread them, of course, and if I'm not in a good position, but it is just so fun. And a good bluffing may still steer a battle in your direction in ways that really make it rewarding. So again, different from a Euro way, if you're a certain number of points behind, that's it. In Splendor, which is a great Euro, well, if you're behind with points, you're behind with points. You need to figure out better ways of adding and crunching numbers, but you can't have a quantum leap there. You can't bluff your way to victory. Here you can, with good reading of the opponent, bluffing and misdirection, etc., etc., etc. So I like the combat system, and I like how it integrates with the main turn, which is taking these actions, performing different things, collecting resources, etc., etc. The diplomatic element is really fun because it's all very nuanced. It's great to have friends, but it comes at a cost that is I have to share the victory. And sometimes then, of course, I want an alliance, and I'm doing the things that do not give a lot of advantage to my ally, and when I want to do those, then I'm going to betray the ally first. Being low in honor can be great or can be terrible. The tiebreaker power is huge, but being able to use certain monsters, for example, they'll only like you if you're despicable than using those monsters. So some monsters have like higher power in the battlefield if you are the lowest honor, the player with the lowest honor in the region. So everything is very situational. It's a clockwork system where really every cog influences something else. Every belt makes other things move in a way that is really fun to interact with. Choose the money wisely, use it for one thing, you cannot use it for another one, so you have the material cost. Other things, of course, is opportunity cost. I want to perform 3 actions, and guess what? There's only one that I can perform. Also, I like the fact that you're always involved, always engaged. For most actions, everybody will make some decisions. You are performing certain actions, I also get to move my units. You get to perform certain actions, I also may be able to play a card. Now, not potentially, technically and materially, it may be that you perform the action that allows everybody to spend money, but I don't have enough money. I don't want to spend it. You perform the action that allows everybody to move, and I decide to stay where I am. But at least even at that point, I'm still analyzing the situation. I'm interested in deciding whether it's good for me to move or not. So even if I don't move, it's the result of an action, of a decision that I actively made. So it's a complex game with many moving parts: maneuvering armies, recruiting armies, purchasing special abilities from the cards, getting monsters, manipulating your level of honor to get this or that advantage, sending people to the shrine, checking the timing in which the gods resolve, etc., etc. A lot going on, and yet as I was playing the game, I almost had the impression I was playing a simpler game, an easier game. Somehow the number of rules, which is considerable, did not get in the way of playability. It just felt like the rules were emanating logically one from the other. They were all very well tied. The game felt so cohesive. To me, that is remarkable. I like games that have a certain degree of complexity, but sometimes it may just be a little too much, especially if the moving parts feel disjointed. Not here. This is a game that feels so cohesive, so tight. In its complexity, it feels tight just because all of the elements coalesce together in a way that is absolutely remarkable. I loved this game. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed every level of decision, and just so many decisions that you have to do. All decisions being not in a vacuum, but the value of all decisions based on the situation that everybody else is creating. Diplomacy, investing, military aspect, bluffing, timing actions, selection of actions, all things that, around each of these you could have a game. Having them all together in a single package can be dangerous. This definitely is an ambitious game, but it's a game that is successful. It puts together all of these elements in a design that is more than the sum of the parts, which is absolutely engrossing, absolutely fun to play beginning to end, and also, in my opinion, it looks great. Not everybody seemed to agree on the status of the game. To me, also, the production is absolutely excellent. So, good job, Cool Mean You're Not. I can't wait now to acquire my copy, because it just so happens this one is not mine. Thank again to my friend Sam, who let me borrow this copy for my video. I apologize to all of the people that that backed the Kickstarter and are waiting for their copy, and maybe they won't be able to sleep well tonight or tomorrow because of all of the praise that I gave to this game. But I honestly think this game deserves all the praise that it can get and more, because it is an absolutely great game. Rising Sun by Cool Mean You're Not.